know, we start with questions. We're in the middle of a complex but crucial basic understanding of differentiation. Questions? No questions, we go on. Then there will be questions. Go on? Okay, good. So we followed the origin of the Bowen family, which was impacted, as you recall, by the First World War. Now we're going to head to the Second World War, and we'll see how the family develops. And the main thing we want to try to understand is how the central triangle in a family changes over time, and to understand how that affects family development. When you see an individual client, as you recall, Bowen used to say that that client comes in with 60 people and with 60 years. With Haredim it's 120, but a lot of people. And one of the things that makes it manageable to try to understand so many people and so many variables is to try to find something central that everything goes through. That's what the central triangle is about. We're trying to understand where everything seems to get impacted by a central triangle. But first we have to understand how it developed. And you'll see here that we're dealing with an American family and the impact of the draft of World War II. Think about your own families and the impact of people moving away, coming back. You know, all these things impact families in different ways. In the Bowen family, as you know, the business was the business of Bowen's mother's father. That was the biological connection to the business. When he died, then Bowen's mother's stepmother was involved in the business, and then she died. And so the three things happened together. The first is that this woman is no longer there, which means that the next generation has to run the business or not run the business. It's a matter of transition. The second thing that happens is that guess who's drafted to World War II? The brother who was born into the business. You remember how he was born into the business? How if he cried and mother wanted to be free of him or to not be free of the, she really wanted to be free of the business or free of the baby, right? And so whichever way it was, his crying would be impacted by the meaning that she gave that was connected to the business. But now he's no longer in the business because he's drafted into World War II. And there's one male in the Luff family, in Bowen's mother's family, that's still connected, and that's her half-brother. And now he marries, so there's another woman that's taking the place of her stepmother. So there's more people to figure out what to do. And as a result, you have this block coming together. The stepbrother, it's the Bowen's uncle, and his wife. They now take the place of what was the stepmother, right? And what you end up having is a triangle that needs to change. The triangle used to be Bowen, his mother, and the second brother, but the brother is drafted. Now, we talked about triangles last time, right? So if we look at the triangle at this particular point, of Bowen, his brother, and his mother, and we say, what do we mean a triangle? Triangle is a central notion in differentiation. It would mean that when Bowen says to his brother, how are things going at the business, that has extra meanings connected to his relationship to his mother and his mother's relationship to his brother. How might that look? Bowen says to his brother, how are things at the business? And the brother says, I think okay. Could happen, right? I think okay. But when he says, I think okay, that means I'm getting along with my mother, or I'm not getting along with my mother. I'd rather not tell you how I'm getting along with mom or not. and she's not going to tell you either, right? So that when Bowen says to his brother, how are things in the business, and the brother says, I think okay, that's a way of saying, stay out of it. Go become a psychiatrist, leave us alone. And who's us? In other words, my relationship with mom, that's the one that's central. You're outside of it for me and for mom, right? Just that simple statement. Now, if Bowen says to his brother, which he never said until the treatment that we're going to be talking about, he says to him, how is it for you to have me not here? Because I'm out studying medicine and you're at home with the business. How does that work for you as my brother, right? And the brother would say, you know what? Let's raise our differentiation. I'm going to talk to you person to person, the two of us, and it's not connected to mom. And it's not connected to how mom relates to you. It's just you and me. This is how I feel. I think you're a little distant. I think that I would feel better if you would ask me more than once every 8 months, how are things in the business? And frankly, there are some things I'd like to talk to you about. Would that be okay for you? And Bowen says to his brother, well, it would be fine for me. Is it connected to mom? And the two of them decide it's not connected to mom, right? So then, instead of a triangle, see, the triangle would be, in this case, the brother and the mother, and mother's relationship to Bowen, the brother's relationship to Bowen, all service keeping the relationship between the brother and mother. If we change it into a triad, then the relationship between the brother and the mother, the relationship between mother and Bowen, the relationship between the brother and Bowen, each have their own separate autonomy. They each exist. They each can, we're going to get to it, co-create. In other words, the dyads, each dyad in the triad can create itself. You know, you see how it works? If Bowen's relationship to his brother has to take into consideration what is mom going to think about it with the brother and how is it going to impact with mom and Bowen, then it limits that relationship. They have to think about another relationship. So if you remember the I position, the ability to begin to talk from what you really feel, so the brother, instead of saying things are okay, which is not an I position, he says, here's how I feel towards you. And Bowen can say, here's how I feel towards you. Then that side of the triad has its own existence. And then, let's say Bowen and his brother change something, and then when the brother talks to the mother, there's room for him to say, you know, I had a conversation with Murray, and you know, I realized in that conversation something that I feel about you, and we're not very good partners because I can't tell you what I think is going wrong because you plutz. So I have to keep telling you that things are going well, and then I have to feel anxious. And if you want to be my partner, so I have to be able to tell you that not enough people have died this month. It's been a bad month. So we have to think about, you know, some way that we can drum up business, which is a little hard to do when you're an undertaker. And then the mother can speak to Murray as well and say, you know, Murray, all you ever do is talk to your brother about the business. You don't ask me what it's like for me to be in this business with my half-brother, and it was my father. I never get to tell you what it's like for me, and to hear from you what it's like for you to be out of the business and off studying medicine. You see? So that way, when one side of a triad co-creates, it creates opportunities or challenges other sides of the triad to also co-create. And that gets squished when you're in triangle. In the triangle, everything services one relationship, and that one also tries not to co-create. In other words, the brother and the mother are just trying to keep it together. Don't bother us about Bowen. I don't care what it's like in New York studying medicine or Washington. I just wanted to keep the business going, and not enough people are dying. And you know, the draft in World War II and so forth. So they're dying abroad. That's just not good business. So the question is whether, when there was more than two people involved, whether there's room for those two people to co-create. You follow? That's what differentiation is about. Dan?
I follow, but I'm having trouble identifying what's the central relationship.
Well, we're going to get to which the central. I mean, the central triangle that we looked at just now, as an example, was this one. which was Bowen, his brother, and his mother. But that's going to change over time.
Is that the central relationship between two of them or between three of them?
That's the central relation for the whole family, actually. When you say a central triangle, it means that every time that the second daughter or the first daughter or the second daughter talks to mom, they're also thinking about how it's going to impact on that triangle. Everything goes through it. That makes it easier. It's not like exhaustive, doesn't explain everything in the family, but it helps you to keep a focus on the family, because otherwise you have to deal with a million different triangles. Just add them up. You see that it becomes hard to handle, hard to focus. And when we try to talk to people, we try to have a focus on something through which other things can be understood. Yeah?
This talks on this question that's been bugging me a whole week, because last week
That's good. So anybody else have things that are bothering them a whole week?
Last week we discussed that attention is quantitative, and therefore it can create jealousy. And when we co-create, that's qualitative, and there's no such thing as jealousy, because each one is co-creating with one another. So isn't attention, giving, let's say, attention to your child, aren't you co-creating? Don't you have that interpersonal relationship?
So the question that's been bothering some people who are dealing with little kids is I made this statement, which, between us, everything that I say, if it bothers you, that's good, right? I said that just dealing with attention is like regulating. Who gets more attention? Whereas co-creating is qualitative. And when it's quantitative, then you can compete for it. So when I get attention, somebody else loses. When it's qualitative, when it's co-creation, nobody loses. Actually, everybody gains because they see that that's possible. And so the question is, isn't attention also qualitative? And so that's actually a very precise question. It depends on the attention. You see, in America, people still talk about quality time. Did some other phrase replace that, or that's still there? It's really has a long life. It's been around for 30 years. So quality time is trying to make that distinction between quantity and quality. That's where the word quality comes from. But, in America, like in America, and people like people, it can become reduced to quantity. He got more quality time than me. So then you're really talking about attention and not about co-creation. So on the other hand, when mom says, he needs some attention, but what she really means is we need to do some co-creating, that's the issue. The word is, the word quality can mean quantity, and the word attention can mean quality, right? So we're talking about what it means, not necessarily the word. As you know, sometimes in America, not in Israel, but sometimes in America, words are sort of spun, and so it becomes confusing because people become very adept at choosing words that fit in a certain way without necessarily meaning what you think they mean. So but that's a good question. So we're talking about not necessarily the word attention, but the quality of it. Okay? Does that answer your question? You'll be okay this week? Okay. Debbie.
So there's a difference between triangles and triads. Triangle is like the negative, the less functional side of a three-part relationship. Right. That's the one that has to be kept stable in order to not shake the boat.
The triangle. The triangle. That's right.
A triad is when you have the possibility of change in any one of the dyads of the. Yeah.
Okay. So Debbie said it better than me. I'll just repeat it, and I'll add one. No, that's the way we create here. When you see, there's more than two people around, right? Anybody have a family of two people here? Right? There's always more than two people. So the question is, how do you talk about more than two people? What's the relationship between what two people do and what a bunch of people do, right? And so what we're trying to say is that when three people are around, but the dyads are each creative, the dyads can be, in the terms that we've talked about here, intersubjective, that they can be involved in co-creation. Then there are three people, but it's not a triangle. It's a triad. There's this side of it, and this side of it, and each of the dyads are able to co-create. When you're dealing with regulation, so then two of the sides of the triangle are already busy regulating the third side. In other words, Bowen and his brother are regulating mother and the brother. Bowen and his mother are busy regulating mother and the brother. And mother and the brother are so regulated by the other relationships that they can't co-create, right? So that the triangle tends to be what diminishes the possibility for co-creation, right? In other words, it's important to make that distinction because sometimes, you know, people are imprecise. You'll see it in the literature too, that any three people are called a triangle. That's not so useful. It's true geometrically, but it's not so useful for our discussion. And so when you say a triad, you mean it's not organized like a triangle, like a regulatory triangle, where different relationships are busy regulating some other relationship. That each relationship can exist on its own. That's the idea.
So what happens?
It was better when she said it, right? Anyway.
What happens in a family of a couple, no children?
Right. Well, the family of the couple usually have parents. Usually have parents, and if they don't have children, they may be connected to their relationship with their parents. So, I mean, any person except a hermit, and one of the reasons that people became hermits because they felt that they were being strangled by triangles, right? So one way to do it is just cut all relationships. But as you'll see from Bowen very shortly, that when you cut off a relationship, that's the relationship. And so there's a relationship that can't grow because there's no relationship. There's no such thing as no relationship. The same thing, one of the great statements in family therapy, which is worth keeping in mind, is there's no such thing as no communication. Is communication. Is real communication. It's like, get off my back. So there's no such thing that doesn't communicate. And when people have relationships, not seeing each other is a way of managing that relationship. Obviously regulatory. You can't co-create when there's nothing face to face. But so if you have a couple, and you see a couple, for example, a couple comes in for treatment, and you say, all right, so Bowen says 60 and 60, so there's like 120, 120, but it's Haredim, so it's 240 and 8,000, whatever. In other words, that these people are coming in with, tell me something. When you good conversations, what are your conversations about her father? Right? What do people talk about? Right? So it turns out that that relationship is busy, you know, saying, what's the matter with her father? And I'm better than her father. So they're not co-creating, they're talking about somebody else. And she doesn't even see her father. We have nothing to do with her. Well, that's terrific. Then you can't co-create anything there. And so that keeps us, I'll give you a personal example. When I was studying this stuff, I must have been around 30 or so, and I had realized I have a twin brother and an older sister, and I had realized that when I see them, I was still in the States, so it wasn't cut off in Israel. Israel is the great cutoff temporarily. I realized that all I ever talked to them about was my parents. And I said, whoa, we're not talking about us, we're talking about a triangle. Let me try for 20 minutes to have a discussion with my brother that doesn't mention my parents. Right? And that wasn't easy, it took a little while. But as you'll see in the Bowen treatment, self-treatment, that sometimes you just do something different and things happen. So is that something that speaks to you? Some of you speak to your siblings about your parents more than about your personal relationship? So, okay, should we go on? Yeah, one more question. One more answer. Debbie's into answers, yeah.
So can in this situation of a couple with no children, can a third part of the triangle be the non-existent child? They're having trouble, for instance, fertility.
Can the third part of the triangle be the imagined, wished for, and not yet existent child? See, that's a question that's an answer. The answer is Favos nicht. Yeah, sure. In other words, the third member of a triangle can be a non-existent or yet to be existent human being. If you think about it, some of you who may have heard among your neighbors arguments about Frumkeit or things like that, that sometimes you can make the eternal one into a triangle, and you argue about what God wants instead of about who you are. And that probably is not the point of the Torah, but it's how people sometimes fall into it. So Rabbi Volby had some unkind words about the word frumkeit. You know, he thought that people arguing about frumkeit are not facing each other and creating what we're supposed to be creating. So something to think about. So yeah, Daniel.
Is that the case also for non-humans that could be part of the triangle, like we said, a business?
Oh, a business can be a triangle. The stock market can be the triangle. Politics is, see, why don't people talk about politics and religion? Because they become triangles. And you talk about that, but you don't talk about each other. And since you asked about non-humans, so there's nothing like a dog.
A what?
A dog. Right. A dog. Right. Okay. So now here's the Bowens family. Well, just so you feel how different they are from you, but they're not as different as you would like. They look different than you, but it's a family. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the treatment. Were you able to read the treatment? Anybody read what Murray Bowen did to his family of origin? Nobody read it?
I was so confused.
Not a single person read it. You read it. Okay, what'd you think, Yaakov?
Can you just tell us where it is?
I thought it was very, you know, sort of extended what we said from last week, and it was different than what I would have thought.
Different than what you, in what way?
Again, I've had extended family experiences, and it was different than this. He was much more old-fashioned in the way he looked at the family.
Right.
So the way he looked at conflict was, I don't know, much more stronger than I would have thought it would have been.
Okay, so he stirs up what's called a tempest in a teapot. He makes trouble out of nothing. And the average person who reads the treatment the first time hates Murray Bowen. So you have something to read now. That'll get you to read it, right? Because he says he's a manipulator.
Do you know what page it's on?
What's that?
Do you know what page
127.
127?
I mean, that's the middle of it, but yeah.
It's a long article, so it's, you know, for when you have lots of free time. But people who read it say, what is it? No, it's not. That's about Bowen. It's the article by Bowen. You want to show it to me? I'll try to tell you where it is. Unfortunately, we have yet to solve the question of pagination of the readers. So it comes. It's the first chapter. It's not about Bowen, it's Bowen himself. It looks like this.
On differentiation of self?
Yeah, on the differentiation of self.
Is it after these PowerPoints or before these PowerPoints?
Oh, it's all the articles come before the PowerPoints. Because, as you know, if you don't do all the reading, how could you understand the PowerPoint, right? So, most people read Bowen's paper and say, that's that. They have not nice words to say about him. They say he's a manipulator. You know, what does he think he's doing? Why doesn't he just go home and talk like a human being? Why doesn't he just talk to his brother and say, listen, you and I need to talk? Why doesn't he just talk to his sister and say, listen, you and I need to talk? And the answer to that is, I think, that any way that he would talk to his brother would still be in the triangles. In other words, the triangle is so entrenched that you think you're talking outside of the triangle, but you're talking inside the triangle. Especially if you're the family's therapist, like some of us in this room may be in our families of origin. And so you go home and say, I'd like to have a talk. And the answer is, oh, you're the one who talks. Okay, so I haven't changed my role. I'm the one who listens or talks, and you're the one who's a schlepper who needs to be listened to, and we haven't changed anything, so I can talk until kingdom come. It's the same old, same old. How do I get a different role? who creates different roles. So Bowen's insight is that I can't create the new roles. We have to create the new roles. What can I do? I can make a mess out of the old roles. And then, if I make a mess out of the old roles, we will come together and do something different. But I have to be in the shipwreck with you. Somebody's on a boat. He says, we need to revise the boat. I'm in the boat with you, but I'm putting a hole in the bottom. And now, Gewalt! But who's saying Gewalt? All of us, including me. Because if I don't say Gewalt, I'm the family's therapist still. I'm not, part of it. Yeah.
I'm wondering if I should ask the question, and maybe just like post it in a forum. You could tell me. But let's say this is the type of therapy that, I guess, let's say if you would do a Bowen, you'd be breaking apart a family, you'd be kind of deconstructing to reconstruct.
Right.
So for beginning therapists, I think most of us are, do we have a right to do such a thing, to start messing up with the family?
Right.
And you're really causing machlokas that you don't know that you could put back together.
Right.
I don't think most of us are skilled to really, with full certainty, or almost full certainty, be able to put things together. We could probably break apart pretty nicely.
Right. So that, just remind me of your name? Elisheva. Let's take a vote. Should Elisheva take her question back? Who wants her to take her question back? Because she's afraid she's going to make us splits here, right? Right.
I'm wondering, like, halachically,
right.
or just even, I think because us right now, what can we put into practice for these sorts of things? I have quite a few clients, from my few clients,
right.
that all have family issues, that all need to work on their family issues.
Right.
And I wouldn't deconstruct their family.
Right.
I just wanted putting it out there.
So Elisheva is raising the question about, now, are we sending you off to do Bowen therapy? Not necessarily. We're trying to get you to understand what Bowen did and how it worked, and then you have some questions, and Kibud Aveim is one of them, right? In other words, you say, wait a minute, the family is okay. Why would I look for trouble? And if you want to see Bowen as the manipulator, you would say he's just looking for trouble to get himself, free from something. And so, by what right does he do this to the family? And how can you talk to your parents that way? Or how can you stir things up? And you're taking a risk, right? Now, the fact that you're taking a risk is absolutely right. And so, one might say about Bowen that he's voting confidence in his family. In other words, he's saying about his family, we can do it. If we deconstruct some of the stuff that makes us strangle each other and not talk to each other and not grow, we can create something different, not me, we. But in order to do that, I have to change my role, right? And my role is the Ibra Chacham. I'm the family's doctor here. So I can't come and act in my role. How do I get out of my role? Well, roles are created, when you're on the stage, you're on the stage. The whole stage is doing the roles, not just me. So how can I start to do something different myself, which would allow everybody to become free of what we've been doing in order to have real relationships, in other words, in order to have co-creative relationships. Now, behind Elisheva's question is, so what? Who needs that? What's the value of co-creative relationships? Who needs that? Why don't we just stay regulated the way we are?
No, I don't.
No, behind it. You didn't ask that.
No, I thought you were saying that I really mean that.
No. But behind it, one could ask, but you didn't, right? Who needs co-creation? What are you talking about? Why do people need that? Just stay regulated. Keep it the way it is. It's an okay family. What's all this business about growth about? Now, if you recall, what I told you last time, Bowen said to himself, there's something constricted in my emotional life. I can't get out of this particular role. And if you extend it, you say, I'm probably not the only one. In other words, that in my family, people can't meet and do anything creative because we're afraid of rocking the boat. But what's so holy about the boat? right? The family are the people in the family, right? One way of organizing those people is the only way to organize it. How does it grow? For example, you know, we talked about when I was 15, this is going to be your exercise. When I was 15, what couldn't I say to my parents? Bowen, right? And what he couldn't say to his parents is, I would like not to be responsible for all you guys. I would like to be free to have some fun and not keep studying all the time. So you can ask me what to do and I can tell you how to solve things. I would like to be free of that. And I would like you to be free of having to ask me so you can ask somebody else or give an answer yourself. In other words, so we can change our roles, so we can expand our roles, but we have to do it together. Now, Bowen said, if I'm constricted, everybody's constricted. If there's a triangle, everything goes to the triangle. But I think my family can do better. In other words, I think I can free us, right? So when we put the hole in the boat, it's not like I shot a hole in the boat from a torpedo ship. I'm in the boat. Now we're all plussing together, and by plussing together, we can do something different. One of the things that Bowen used to say, and I tried it myself a few times, it's a very deep statement. It sounds idiotic, but it's very deep. Let me go home, and for 20 minutes on the clock, for 20 minutes, when I feel like I'm going to say something, I'm not going to say it. I'm going to just refrain from doing what I always do and see what happens. Because 20 minutes is, as you know, sort of, you see it in sessions too, it's the time that things get organized. That's how people put the show up. It takes about 20 minutes and everybody's in their roles. If I stay out of that role, somebody else is also going to stay out of their role. Then something else can happen that isn't the same old, same old. So, so Bowen, you see, a manipulator has a goal. Bowen could say, my goal is that I want to be this. And I'm going to move everybody around so I can be this, right? Then he's manipulating everybody. But he didn't know what the this is. He said, I'm not creating the this. We're going to create the this. I have to stop doing that. If I'm not doing that, the this will come about between us, right? And so that is not a manipulation, but it is a deconstruction. That's the correct word. Deconstruction was not a word yet. Actually, when Bowen was doing it, deconstruction was available in Europe, but Americans hadn't thought about it yet. Things take about 30 years, and then America started deconstructing everything. But it is a deconstruction. But it's a deconstruction to allow for a reconstruction of responsible adults who can create relationships that don't act like you're 14, because that's how it was when you were 14, right? In other words, how can we all grow up together? How can we do things that adults do, but we have to stop being what we fixed ourselves as when we were much younger? Now, some families don't need that, right? But Bowen's family needed it, and Bowen's family was both needed it and was able to do it, right? That's the Bowen idea. Was there another question? Now, if you say, can I do it? Like this kind of conversation for the purpose of helping the family to grow, that would be the correct, definition. Are there halachic constraints? So, I'm not a Rav. And it's an interesting question, but you'd have to explain to the person who you're asking the question what on earth you're talking about. Because if you just say, can I say to my mother something, without explaining why and how and whatever and voting confidence, you might get a different answer than if it's understood. So the people who are going to make that question possible to ask, none of us here necessarily got to give the answer, but to formulate the question, right? Formulating a halakha question is a big part of how things go. You'll see in the tshuvot that the first thing that the person gets is a compliment on a good question, or not, depending on, usually if it's not a good question, there's not an answer, but these days things are different. Well, yeah.
I guess I imagine like it would come up for many of us a lot, just to do things like this, because this is the Family Institute, it's family therapy.
Right.
So it seems like a good question to just know those types of...
You agree, Dina? That's something that the Family Institute ought to maybe bring in some of the rabbis who... So there are some rabbis who have gone through the Family Institute. They understand what we're doing, and maybe we should have a discussion on those issues. It's an important issue. I see it's important enough that we have some questions. Yeah.
is it not only the therapist, I mean, from the way I see it, it's not only the therapist question, it's also a question of the people that can treat.
For what?
For the person that is being in therapy.
Right.
Because sometimes the person will be like what you said, like a person comes to a point where he says, I cannot continue like this. You know, they're coming for a reason, you know what I'm saying? Something needs to be changed. Change creates certain shifting, certain uncomfortable thing. You never know how it's going to end up. But the person is coming to therapy, there is a reason why he's there, and he's there because he's saying, like, I cannot take this anymore. So it's not only like the therapist question, really.
Right. So you're pointing out everybody heard it? You're pointing out the contradictions here. It's not so simple. People come for change. And then if you say to them, well, you're not really allowed to do anything that can produce change, then we're not really helping them or their families. So on the other hand, they're going to have the question of what can I do, what am I allowed to do? Yeah?
Well, I would want to add that individual therapy is changing the I, not necessarily the we, but then they're going to go back, and now that their I is changed, so then their triangles are going to be changed, so then we can't do individual therapy either.
Right.
To make it more complicated.
So in a good situation, what you're saying is that when I realize that I'm limiting myself, so I'm going to be less limited, right? Hopefully, right? Sometimes individual therapy stops there, you know, and that you say, I now understand what's troubling me, but I can't do anything about it, which is not voting no confidence in yourself, it's voting no confidence in relationships. So is voting no confidence in relationships a good idea? It's an interesting question. The sources are not 100% clear about it, but it's an interesting question. Another question?
Yeah, I wanted to know, you're saying that Bowen himself felt emotionally constricted, right?
Yeah.
So he felt that the way to deal with that is by doing this whole, like rocking his whole family to reconstruct, whatever it is. Is that because, obviously there's not one only way, but is this the best way to do it as a whole family system?
Okay, so that's a wonderful question. Bowen did it his way because he felt he needed to do it, and that's what occurred to him. Is that the best way for everybody to do it? There is no best way for everybody to do it. That's part of what we're going to be learning here is how do you figure out what's the right way? See, some families, you would go and do this, and somebody would take out a gun and shoot you. That would be a bad solution, right? Presumably, right? But there are families like that. We live with some families like that in the Middle East. You know, if it's a potential for violence, then there are things you can't necessarily do. But then you pay a price for not being able to do it. So is there a risk or
always paying a price? If somebody would go about it in an individual manner, is that always paying a price?
Well, you see, that's who pays the price and how. That has to do with voting confidence in your family. In other words, when you say, I'm going to do something I haven't done before, you're not just a hero. You know, in individual therapy, sometimes it feels like this. I'm going to be a big hero. You're voting confidence in the person who you're talking to, that they can do something with it. And if you don't think they can, then of course you have to go back and look at whether you don't think they can or you don't think you can. And you know, you spend a couple years on that. And then if you had one more question, then I want to go on so we can have time for the exercise. Yeah.
That's okay. It's okay.
If you're taking it back, it's not a good idea.
Oh, okay. Well, we're building off of what Hannah was saying. What's your name? And Alexandra, that like the idea of like halachic, are we allowed to like break things up? I think what Hannah was trying to say is that applies to anything. If a person comes in and says, I don't want to be from anymore, are we allowed to say, okay, let's do it this way? Like, because I'm not a rav, I'm not necessarily allowed to instruct. Whatever the situation is, it doesn't just apply to families, it applies to anybody. So how can we as therapists be like equipped to know what we're allowed to do with somebody?
Right. Well, that's another question that if these questions are coming up, then we should try to help to make a discussion that's meaningful about it. That's different than giving answers, but to have a discussion that's meaningful, because the question is, what's the role of the therapist? And that's what you're doing in the course that you're doing with Stacy and with Dina, trying to figure out when somebody comes in and says, I don't know whether I should be from, and your role is to tell them to be from. You know, your role is something a little different than that, but
Exploring it with them.
what's that?
Exploring what their feelings are.
Your role is to help them to figure out. Right.
Yeah, but what if the story means them not be jealous anymore and then
So
you're
that's
not
fine.
responsible?
So-
But you're not you're not going to change that. You're just helping them become more clear on what they want to do.
I think that's like, you're right, but it's also, that's like, that's the simple way. If it were just very simple, do you know what I mean? Like,
What do you mean? How
there are times in
therapy
therapy
that?
well, you do sometimes give advice during therapy. You don't just explore and keep asking questions. There's a time for advice. There's a time for like setting.
So you suggest why don't you try this?
What?
Why don't you try this? And this is not a from thing, let's say. I don't want to do this, let's say the guy says, I don't want to daven anymore.
Okay.
I don't want to daven, I don't want to, I mean, I'm sure it's going to, it happens to not be gentle.
A regular therapist that wasn't from would say, great, why don't you try that for a few days and let me know how it goes.
Well, no, you see, the question, because I want to go on, and this is a deep discussion. You know, when each of you will find a different answer. There isn't one answer that's true for every one of you, and there isn't the right answer for every given client. But if you say to yourself, a person is coming in to change, they're trying to grow, they're trying to find some other alternative, and I can't actually decide for them what their way is, because Avodas Hashem is not something that you can do for somebody else, right? Do I get that right? I get that right? In other words, Rahman al-Liba Bai, that the whole issue is you have to find your heart. You can't work by somebody else's heart. And if in your heart is not working right now, because you're coming into therapy because it's not working 100%, so you can't say, here's the answer. You have to go through the heart. And in order to go through the heart, you don't decide what that heart is, which triangles it was connected with, who was killed in the Holocaust 3 generations before, what kind of pains are involved, and so forth. You don't decide that. You help somebody to figure it out, and of course, you're engaged with a sort of a wish for them, that they come. Every therapist, in some ways, has a wish, leave from kite out, that the person with me comes to a cultural solution that is comfortable for me too. That's not just from people. The Torah is, is there, but that's true of the culture of the therapist, right? So, no, you don't think so?
It is, but one of them has real ramifications.
Right, so it makes it...
If I help lead someone to do Averas, that's very different than what a psychotherapist thinks, oh, okay, great, now it's doing
right, so that you'll be dealing with for the rest of your lives, which is there are people who will come in and need to move in ways that are not only halachic in order to grow. And that's a question that it looks like we need to have some more deep discussion about it. So what I wanted to get to with, I think we've gotten to the main points of what Bowen did, which is to deconstruct the ship, devote confidence in his family. What he did in the middle, if you read it, is he broke all the triangles. In other words, he spoke to his brother, not as, here I am, Murray, I have the answers. He said, I'm a meddlesome brother, right? And he spoke to his younger sister who said, Murray, it's you and me against the family. He said, get out of here. If you tell my mother that this, I'm going to say that I never talked to you about it. In other words, to break those coalitions that just with the same old triangles that, but not in order to create something new, in order to allow something to happen. And in the end, you'll see at the very end of the story, a very moving section, which most people sort of leave out, where he says, and now I was able to take a trip with my father. Remember, the family got pulled into the mother's family. His father's family disappeared. He was an orphan, but he moved into the family business of the mother. And so the father's own life was sort of swallowed up by the mother's family, right? And Bowen didn't really appreciate who his father was and where he came from. And so after this happened, he was able to take a trip with his father and say to him, now I know what a relationship is. Well, that sounds positive, right? And then, of course, the question will be, is this the only way to get to a relationship? Is it valuable to have a relationship? Is it important to be able to speak to your father in a way that you weren't able to speak before? Is it important for you? Is it important for your father? Is it important for how you'll be as a father with your children, right? So what happened by deconstructing is the family was able to do things a little different. And doing things different means not in triangles, that each of the dyads, now we weren't in the family to see with a microscope how each dyad changed. He describes some of them, but that's the basic point, that you take relationships that are based on regulation and triangles. You begin with an eye position, you stay out of triangles, and keep doing something which we're calling co-creation. Now, as a result, you see there are 3 parts of differentiation, which makes differentiation a difficult concept. If you want to sell a concept, don't go past 2. Once you have 3 parts to a concept, if you're in business, you're dead. You're not going to sell it. 3 parts of a concept becomes too complicated. It doesn't sell, but it's usually true. Because you want to know how the 3 are connected. Bowen actually spoke about the eye position, and he spoke about the triangles. He did not speak about co-creation. You won't find it in Bowen, not in the Bowen that you read, not the Bowen that you read about, but it's there. It's just not privileged. It's not spoken about. But when he said, I now have a relationship with my father that's a true relationship, that's what he means, I think. Now, why wasn't co-creation in the notion of differentiation? 1968, America, male, you know, people weren't yet at the point of talking about what people do together. Family therapy was getting there, but didn't quite get there. So co-creation is something that we're adding in here to try to understand what exactly you're doing. You know, you start with an eye position, but you don't stay only there. You stay out of triangles, so you're in dyads, and then what do you do in the dyads? So I think what you do in the dyads is co-creation. Now, see, the eye position is presence. It means not erasing myself and not erasing the other person. You say, Mower says to his brother, this is how I feel, and I want to know how you feel. It's pretty simple, right? And it's the beginning of a dance. The main point of it is that it allows the possibility to stay in the dance with the other person. If you want to see Bowen, the whole business about the genograms, everybody does genograms, but Bowen really did genograms. So, you know, genograms were really the method of looking at the triangles and looking at the system as it was.
Did he create them?
What's that?
Did he create genograms?
No, genograms were created by geneticists. But he was the one who brought it mostly into family therapy, not only. Now, let's just skip this and go to the next. Okay, now differentiation. You see, high differentiation means co-creation. There are 2 ways not to co-create. One is for people to turn their backs on the other, and the other is for people to swallow each other, right? Now, that's important to understand because we'll see other ways of understanding that think that the world is, there's a span between the families that are cut off and the families that are enmeshed. And that doesn't make so much sense because you'll see families who sometimes are enmeshed and sometimes are cut off. That was true, it was noticed first in families with addictions, and you see that being cut off and being enmeshed, they seem to be like opposites. They're not opposites, they're just 2 ways of not having co-creation. You can either swallow each other, so we can't co-create because we're not different, or you can turn your backs on each other and then you don't have a relationship, so you can't co-create. But you'll find that the 2 can coexist in families, and you'll see that all the time. That people say, well, I always talk to your mother, but I don't talk to my mother at all. I said, just a minute here. You talk to your mother, you don't talk to your mother. Well, so I never talk to her except when I agree with her completely. And so you see that you have a low differentiation, but it's expressed partly by being enmeshed and partly by being cut off. It's not that there's an actual range there. Co-creation is the goal. And to create changes in differentiation, which is what we do when we do therapy. Individual therapy, couples therapy, families therapy. The goal is that the family grow. In other words, that the level of differentiation become higher, that there's more possibility for eye positions, more possibility for dyads that are not triangles, and more possibility for co-creation. That's what we do when we do treatment. So you gave an example of, you know, you do individual treatment, but you ask yourself, is this person using what he's learned to create a higher level of differentiation, not just for himself, in the family together. Changes in differentiation take time. We're focused on the process of differentiation, what is happening. It's not unusual for a family to need help to grow. So, you know, when a family comes in, you don't necessarily say, ugh, this family has failed and we're going to make them succeed, or this family is pathological and we're going to make them normal. Those are not useful constructs. A useful construct is that a family is having trouble at this point in differentiation, that they're struggling for differentiation, and there's something about the symptoms or the anxiety, it's all connected to the ability to grow in differentiation, right? And you have to play with it. In other words, there's no map for creating differentiation. So that's part of the question that you're asking. You have to do it like Bowen? No. You have to recreate it every time. You have to do it within what works for a given family group. And the last thing is, you remember the realm of the hand, which is regulation, and you remember the realm of the eye, which is intersubjective. You remember? Anybody remember? Remember? Yeah. And so we had this map, and we said that people are involved with regulation until it's secure enough, and when the regulation is secure enough, right, so you can vote confidence in the family that the boat is not going to sink, then you can be engaged in the intersubjective. Remember that? So just add in one more arrow. The differentiation, low differentiation, what are people doing? They're not doing nothing. They're regulating. They're busy doing regulation. And as differentiation rises, that's when we get to the intersubjective. So you say to yourself, where is the family at? What is the level of differentiation? If the family needs to be better regulated, you help them to be better regulated first. But ultimately, you don't want to be addicted to that. You want to be able to help them to grow past it at some point, maybe in another generation, at some point moving towards the intersubjective co-creation, which is a higher level of differentiation. And so, anybody know this picture? This is Escher Belvedere, and the first time I taught Bowen, a art therapist brought this in and said, look here, you see, it's all a paradoxical structure. You think you're going in, but you're actually going out. That's Escher, right? And it's impossible to figure out the structure. The only place where the structure is safe is right here in prison at the bottom. So that's not a paradoxical structure. That's a clear structure. And so she said, this is Bowen before the family treatment. He's suffering. It's clear. It's well regulated. Everybody knows how the ship runs, right? But he's in prison. Look at his face, right? He's not a happy camper. And then this is Bowen looking at the structure of the family and understanding that it's problematic. He's thinking, that's a thinking cap, he's thinking about how to get himself out of prison, but not just himself. He's thinking about how to get all of us out of prison. Because low differentiation, just regulation, is kind of a prison. And people may say, I'd rather be in prison because I know what I'm doing. It's, you know, but they're not happy. They're not able to be full creative people. So if anybody identifies with this and can try to identify with this, then I think you've understood Bowen visually. We're going to stop here so that you have a full 50 minutes to work on the exercise, which you can probably guess, and if you haven't guessed it, so I printed it out. And then more questions about this next time.